Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. Perryn Keys here, joined today by Wilson Alexander, our lead LSU beat reporter, and by the venerable, the long-time, the should-be happy Scott Rabalais, having just gotten back from Orlando.
I'm happy to be
the happiest place on earth. We're all here to discuss what was quite a week for specifically the LSU football program, but also the LSU athletic department in general. So we will get into that. Gentlemen, how y'all doing today?
Good. Yeah, I'm kind of. It was a very newsy week. Maybe this one won't be quite as hectic.
Yeah, so Brab had a couple of days off in Orlando, but those got blown up thanks to some LSU athletic news. So.
I know. I was like, okay, well, I'll get back to my hotel and write a column for the next day, but I had to do the newsletter anyway, which you'll mention later. But it's always something. It's never a dull moment covering LSU. That's for sure.
Right. Blake Baker comes aboard after LSU parts ways with Matt House. We still have several position coaches to see what LSU will do with. We had plenty of other news as well. We had, obviously, Bryce Underwood commits, Harlem Berry commits, Jyaire Brown commits from Ohio State, and we will get into all of that, but first a bit of business. We are here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically the YouTube channel LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. You can catch us there live Mondays and Thursdays. If you don't catch us live, you can always catch us on that same YouTube channel after the fact. So please subscribe. Please subscribe to The Advocate, whether you do that with our print edition, with our digital edition, one way or the other, or some sort of combination of both. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Please subscribe to our LSU newsletter. We are talking about all things happening all the time, all day long. And if you had found out, if you had subscribed to the LSU newsletter, if you are a subscriber, you would have gotten the breaking news that LSU hired Blake Baker there on Friday night. That was delivered straight to your inbox, straight to your phone, straight to your desktop. To sign up for the LSU newsletter, please go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are, if you don't catch us on our social channels on Mondays and Thursdays, you can also catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever other finer podcasts are found. And of course, we are brought to you today and every day by Champion Wealth Strategies. Champion Wealth Strategies is a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL Financial Member FINRA, SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. To learn more, contact Champion Wealth Strategies and plan like a champion today. So, gentlemen, been quite a week, as we said. LSU parts ways with Matt House, and there was at least some talk about whether LSU can, afford buyouts and another big number for another big defensive coordinator. Well, that certainly seems to be the case. They decided to shell out big bucks for Blake Baker and got the guy they wanted. Wilson?
That's absolutely right. It was became very clear early in this process after LSU fired Matt House and the three other defensive assistants last Wednesday that their main target was going to be Blake Baker, and I think we started discussing that kind of a little bit on Thursday, and that got even stronger throughout the rest of the day Thursday, to the point where it seemed like on Friday something was going to get done, and. Then obviously finally kind of happens in terms of, Blake and his agent sending the contract back and all that. And, we always say in college athletics, the deal is not done until it's been signed on the dotted line and the guy's up at the podium and all that stuff. And so that finally kind of happened at Friday night when, news broke and all of that. And, like you said, LSU, had to pay up to get the guy that they wanted in this situation. Blake made $1.4 million at Missouri this year. He then signed a contract extension in December. And the key word there is signed. This is different from the Mike Denbrock situation. Yep. Exactly, where Denbrock never signed anything. That it exponentially reduced his buyout. And then when Notre Dame came to him with a reported 4-year deal that's worth up to about $9 million, there was nothing really getting in the way of him taking that. Whereas with Blake, he had already signed this contract extension with Missouri. And so that was the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reported. He was going to be making about $1.9 million a year moving forward with escalators in the contract. And there was a $950,000 buyout on top of that.
Which LSU has to pay.
LSU is covering that buyout. and it is now paying Blake Baker $2.5 million a year. Apparently, Missouri, according again to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, was going to be willing to try to kind of, even offer Blake more than he had already signed to try to keep him. They wanted to keep him. They'd already been proactive in trying to do so with the contract extension in December, and we're still trying to, I think, at times in this process. But ultimately, LSU ends up now making him the highest paid coordinator, highest paid assistant in college football. And so, went out and made a really big swing here in terms of the financial commitment to Blake Baker. And so now he's going to have to be able to go and back up that number and prove that he's, basically worth the cost. Got to be able to turn around this LSU defense, one of the worst in school history this past season. He was able to do that at Missouri here in a pretty quickly within, when he came, Missouri had, a defense that was ranked in the hundreds and everything basically, and in all the major statistical categories. And that's what he's inheriting with LSU. And so he's got to be able to do what he did at Missouri, which is get it now to the 25th ranked defense this past season in a 2-year span. That's what he's going to try to do. And we'll see if he can, because, again, LSU has committed quite a bit of money to him, and he's got to be able to now back that up.
Rab, we have discussed many times now that Scott Woodward has said many, many times himself that he believes in human capital and believes in spending for human capital. Did any of this surprise you? The price tag, going after the guy, getting the guy they want. We've seen LSU do this many times, but, hey, look, at some point you think maybe at some point you're going to run out of millions.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a little surprising that Blake Baker is obviously he's someone they know. He was on Ed Orgeron's last staff in 2021. He's got ties to the area. He played football at Tulane. His wife was an all-SEC soccer player at LSU. Right. So there are ties, and so there's some familiarity. But is he the biggest name in college? Among college coordinators? No, probably not. And you're paying him more than anyone else is getting paid. Obviously, this became a bidding war between LSU and Missouri. As Wilson said, this is the guy that Brian Kelly wanted the most. This was his top target, and they had the wherewithal, the resources, and the resolve to go get him. And so I guess I'm surprised, and then I'm like, well, LSU has shown a lot of times that they're going to pay what was necessary to get the coach that they want. We saw it with Brian Kelly. We saw it with Kim Mulkey. We've seen it in a number of instances, and this is a big fix that LSU has to make. Obviously, as Wilson said, the defense was historically bad by LSU standards this past season. Historically bad. And they need someone who has a track record of saying, taking a bad defense and fixing it. Certainly a school in Missouri with maybe not less resources, in terms of finances, but certainly not in the center of a talent pool like LSU.
Not a top 10 program, and not as
no, it had a top 10 season this year.
Sure.
But it is something I'm sure some people out there are watching and are reading about this and going, didn't LSU score 49 points against Missouri this year in the game in Columbia? Scored 42 on offense. They had a pick 6. I think that was one of 3 games they gave up 30 points or more this year, Wilson? Yeah.
So, and that was the only time this season that Missouri gave up more than 31 points in a game, whereas LSU did it pretty much weekly.
8 times this year they gave up 30 or more points out of 13 games. So it's it's modern college football. You're going to give up points and yards sometimes. I mean, that's just the way it is, But it's a very interesting hire. Now they have to make more hires. Obviously, They still have to fill 2 secondary positions and a defensive line position, and decide what to do with John Jancic, who they retained, and Diaco, Bob Diaco. Yes. I want to say Mike Diaco. Bob Diaco, who filled in for Jancic this year, and is of course the offensive coordinator. So we're going to see what that guy gets paid. So it's not just it's a considerable investment, and the thing that strikes me with this and all of the commitments and the players that they've gotten, it shows that as I wrote about in a column this weekend, LSU is making a big commitment to winning and winning soon. As Brian Kelly said during the season, I don't have time to wait.
Right.
He said, look, I'll give time to wait. Yeah, he'll be 63 during this coming football season. And so, and you have, of course, the new era dawning with the expanded SEC and the expanded college football playoff. And LSU is obviously making the effort, making the commitments to being a national contender again. And we'll see how this all works out.
One thing about that Missouri defense this past year that I think LSU fans can maybe hope to see and maybe anticipate seeing is aggressiveness. Missouri was tied for third in the SEC in both tackles for loss and sacks, 88 tackles for loss, 39 sacks. And that was both in the top 20 nationally as well. And that is the kind of, I think, approach that could be very useful for this defense, especially when you look at somebody like Harold Perkins. How is Blake Baker going to be able to, use him, and can he really unleash Harold and some of these other edge rushers that LSU has? Who, when we looked at LSU's defense this year and watched it all season, everything just seemed like everything was being dictated to them, and it always felt like they were sort of reacting instead of being the aggressor and making the offense play from behind. It was never a situation, really. It's certainly in the most important games and in the biggest games, where LSU was dictating the terms in the flow of the game on defense. And if Blake Baker can take what LSU has on defense this year and in the future continue to grow it through recruiting, and make it more aggressive and really put offenses on its heels instead of being, the one that's sort of sliding backwards, then that can be something that is maybe, that maybe that's what you can expect out of the Blake Baker defense. And I'm sure we'll learn more as we go along with him. But those are some of the early stats that kind of jumped out when looking at what Missouri did this past year that I think you can give you some hope from an LSU defensive perspective about what to expect next year. Also, the fact that, like, in terms of, Missouri jumped from, like I said, in the hundreds to 56th. In Baker's first season, like, that was a considerable jump in a 1-year span. So if you're looking for, maybe it won't be all doom and gloom next year talking about LSU's defense. Oh, can it really get turned around in a year? Is it going to jump from hundreds to top 15? I would
Probably
be
not.
shocked. That would be like one of the biggest stories in college football if that happened. But maybe back into respectable territory, which is what we not necessarily respectable, but average,
Get
maybe
to
even
average.
in a 1-year span. I think that's reasonable. He's shown that he can do that, and that is something that is going to be really important for this team next year, because, like, as we said all year, if they just had an average defense, then this team could be playing tonight, possibly. I mean, in the national championship game. That's at least in the conversation, in contention for that, because of what it had on offense.
Yeah, just be respectable. I mean, LSU's defense got just pushed around all season long, and I'm sure a lot of you had the same reaction that we did at the end of the ReliaQuest Bowl, where they blitzed 3 straight times.
Where the hell was that?
It's like, where was this all season? And they gave up big yards and big plays all year. Why not take some chances on defense? And they never seemed willing to do so, even to the point where, as we've talked about before, that when Pete Jenkins comes in and says you're playing too far off the line of scrimmage on the defensive line, you gotta cry. Like, they shouldn't need that. So anyway, just be more respectable, because and there are a lot of questions still to answer about the offense as well. But the indication we got from that bowl game with Garrett Nussmeier, they're gonna still be pretty good on offense. Can you expect them to lead the nation? And LSU, by the way, will finish with the number 1 scoring offense and the number 1 total offense this season in the country. Can they be that good? Well, that's really hard to expect, but they can still be really good. And maybe the defense meets them somewhat halfway, and you put that together, and perhaps you have a college football playoff contender for 2024.
You would at least certainly have a team that is more balanced and playing
More
possibly
balanced,
complementary football, which we never saw this year, really. I mean, in extremely limited spots. There was the interception that Harold had against Missouri that kind of turned the tide, and there was a couple defensive plays made late in the second half against Texas A&M. Other than that, I can't think of a lot of situations where LSU really played complementary football. It was usually just the offense being heroic and saving the day.
Unless they just had so much more talent than the opponent, like Army or Georgia State or something like that.
So LSU's defense still has 3 position coaches to fill, presumably defensive line, safeties, and cornerbacks. Wilson, what do you expect to see here over the next maybe week or two?
Yeah, we'll have to. I don't have the best answer for this, unfortunately, right at the moment, because from talking to people, especially like late last week, the main focus was getting Blake Baker, getting the defensive coordinator hire figured out. That was something that we talked about, was what was Brian Kelly's approach going to be? Was he going to go ahead and fill in some of these position coaches and then, kind of do it all simultaneously? Or was he going to kind of get his defensive coordinator in position and then go after those assistants? Even though, we know they've been talking to, into potential targets for these other position coaches. But it was clearly he wanted to go ahead and get his defensive coordinator, and that was like the primary focus and sort of taking up all the attention late last week. And now it's sort of, okay, shifting focus to really figuring out who is going to be some of these position coaches. So that being said, Bo Davis is a name that we heard a lot throughout this process. He's certainly somebody LSU was going after. It seems like that may have cooled kind of late last week. There was a report from a Texas reporter that he's expected to stay at Texas. And as we said,
would have taken a lot to get him to begin with.
Extremely lot. We're talking about money. Right. Bo Davis is already making $1 million at Texas.
Right.
And to get
probably
him,
have to buy him out.
Yeah. And then pay him more.
Right.
And then you set a precedent there of, you've got some offensive coaches who you probably need to pay and give raises to after what was accomplished this season. And then, you're talking about money and where it's going to come from and is it ever going to dry up? Like, you would have had to boost up everybody on the offensive side to probably a fairly comparable level. And it would have been hard. Like you said, just financially, it would have been maybe a little bit hard. And so it seems like they may be going in a different direction there. One name, it'll just be kind of interesting to see is if Blake Baker has any interest in trying to bring over some of his Missouri staff. Maybe Kevin Peoples is a name to look out for. He's Missouri's edge rushers coach. They have... Basically, their defensive line coaches, they had two of them, essentially. One for the interior guys, one for the edge players. And Peoples coached the edge rushers. And so that might be someone to look out for. But we'll see. Again, that's very early, I think, in the process. And then the name that I think is still very much in the mix is Corey Raymond to probably coach corners. But again, I think it was maybe a situation where Brian Kelly wanted to get in as defensive coordinator and then let that defensive coordinator have a say of some kind. And Baker and Raymond coached together in 2021, so they would have some familiarity with each other. If that is a situation that LSU wants to go in and get his input, though, now that he's in place, we'll see.
That would have been sort of my next subtopic on that, which was, well, okay, obviously the head coach has final say on everything, but we're going to guess that maybe Blake Baker came in saying, well, yeah, I want input on, I want a defensive line coach who coaches this specific way, this specific technique, something like that. So
you got to give the guys some latitude in that respect. Just if you're paying them this much,
but
a certain amount of trust implied.
Especially because Brian Kelly isn't a defensive coach in the mold of like a Saban or a Kirby Smart, where like they are very hands-on, kind of controlling the defense. They always have throughout their careers. Like Brian Kelly's usually been more on the offensive side of the ball and has typically kind of let his defensive coordinators handle that side. And that wasn't as much the case this past season. Brian Kelly seemed a little bit more involved, sitting in more on defensive meetings when things started to go awry, trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? Why is this so bad? And obviously then he makes a change at defensive coordinator and throughout the staff. And so, but I do think he kind of wants to let Blake Baker, certainly have a say in some of these decisions and as they move forward. And so, again, I think Corey Raymond's still in the mix, but we'll have to see if that's the direction that it ends up falling in.
A week and a half ago, I think we all would have said, well, hey, no matter what happens, some of these assistant coaches have to be ace recruiters because there are grave concerns about whether Brian Kelly and his staff can recruit well. Well, a week and a half
answered a lot of those concerns.
Yeah, a week and a half later, LSU has gotten a commitment from Dominic McKinley for this class, the defensive tackle from Acadiana, followed by Harlem Berry, the number 1 running back in the nation from St. Martin's down in New Orleans, and then Bryce Underwood, obviously the big fish, the quarterback from Belleville, Michigan, number one quarterback in the class of 2025.
Having already gotten the number 1 receiver, DeCorian Moore.
That's right.
Back in August, I believe.
That's right. So it was quite a week for LSU on the recruiting trail. Rab, I'll put this to you because obviously you've been here since 1941.
Just after the war started.
It surprised me. Cookie Riley, our new colleague, had this in his story. When Underwood committed, that this was the first and only 5-star quarterback that LSU has signed. The only other one being Ryan Perrylou. I would have thought that either Brandon Harris or Jamarcus Russell would have been a 5-star.
I remembered Jamarcus Russell as being a 5-star, but apparently that wasn't the case. Yeah,
it's quite a get though, is it not? I mean, this is a surprise. It's not a surprise because we knew LSU was in the mix, but it's a surprise from the standpoint of, well, this is the first 5-star that they've gotten in almost 20 years, and you get it. You grab a guy out of Belleville, Michigan. It speaks to what they've done with their quarterbacks as of late.
And before we wrap, real quick, the first time they've got a commitment from and landed the number 1 quarterback in the country.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean all those things. It's not like last year Arch Manning was the number one player in the country and the number one quarterback. So it's not like he's in your backyard like Ryan Perrylou was back in the day. So it's like you when you get him from Michigan, and at Michigan they're playing fairly good football right now, right? They're doing okay. But this to me I think is an example of where LSU is now with the quarterback position. It's almost startling,
right.
But they brought in transfers who have been great. Obviously, Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels, and we've seen them blossom in 2 years. But this is trying to start from the ground level with a high school quarterback, and LSU has not been able to get those players, from high school. Arch Manning, he was never going to come here. I was going to eat this coffee table if Arch Manning came to LSU. Okay, that was never going to happen. But I mean, anybody. It was as far as quarterbacks go, they've gotten a lot of pretty good players, and I don't want to detract from anyone they have on the team now, like Ricky Collins and the other young man who's what?
Colin Hurley.
Hurley, he's like 13. No, I'm kidding.
He's 16.
He's 16, and he's going to be on the team. So not to detract from them, and because Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels were 4-star quarterbacks coming out of high school. So anybody can blossom, and anyone can maybe not live up to those standards. But it's just the fact that you got that guy, and it's like this is now like, this is someplace I can go and thrive as a quarterback. And look, it means so much. I mean, you look at a lot of the teams that make the college football playoff when it's been a 4-team playoff. Now we're going to 12 this year, but. You've got to have a dynamic quarterback. And so you at least, again, it's no guarantee that he's going to come in here and be the next Heisman Trophy winner or anything like that. But he is quite a talent, and he's quite highly regarded, and it speaks well for you in the post Garrett Nussmeier era. We certainly assume Garrett's going to be the starting quarterback this coming season, and but he's going to move on eventually, and it's just remarkable just seeing how LSU has struggled to bring in, really top shelf talent at the quarterback position for years and years and years. And now here's Bryce Underwood.
In a 5-year span, you've had 2 Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks and now the number 1 quarterback recruit in the country. Like that, just to think about how much this position has changed. It was a quarterback wasteland basically for years.
It was.
And now it is turning into a position of strength on the team. That is what you need in modern college football, which you needed for many years anyway. But particularly, you need that. And LSU has suddenly, not really suddenly, but over the last 5 years has really gotten a lot stronger at this position. And it is a credit to Joe Sloan and some of the other recruiters on the staff. When we talk about what is LSU going to do at offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan's ability to recruit top quarterback talent. He was already putting LSU in the mix for top quarterbacks nationally, and now he's landed, kind of the big fish here with Bryce Underwood. That's a pro in terms of what, when you're looking at if Sloan should be the next OC, or certainly have an elevator role on staff in some capacity, like his recruiting for quarterback talent is certainly one reason to consider it and to be why. And so now when you think about, also how LSU's lined up at quarterback right now, the teams are still going to come after Bryce Underwood. LSU's got to hang on to this.
It's a long way to December.
It's a long way to signing day. He's a junior right now, and so LSU's got to get to December. 12 months from now, that he would actually sign. And so, but assuming that happens here, you've got Garrett Nussmeier. As Bryce Underwood is playing his senior season, Garrett Nussmeier, we think, will be in his first year as a starter. And then Garrett will have another year of eligibility that he could use and could actually come back that year. Mm-hmm. And maybe Bryce then comes in as a freshman. And then maybe you sort of let Bryce develop for a year, and then maybe he takes over. But at the same time, LSU will also have A.J. Swan, who has, the Vanderbilt transfer who came in here. He's going to have 2 years of eligibility. So he'll be in the mix. Ricky Collins, as he continues to develop, he would be somebody who would, certainly himself want to get himself into the mix there. And then Colin Hurley, who, like we said, he's coming in as a 4-star quarterback in this class, and he's going to, we'll see what he can do as well. So it's like LSU has set itself up at quarterback. It's like set up a line of succession, which, especially in the modern transfer portal era, you kind of have to continue to maintain that.
Right.
And that's, certainly, guys could transfer. all those things. But now you at least have put yourself in a solid position from recruiting through the high school ranks, and adding like Swan as a transfer. We'll see what he can do to at least kind of maintain it as a position of strength into the future as you go through sort of this first half of the Brian Kelly era. Because, when Garrett Nussmeier came back in the spring, we got to sit down with Brian Kelly in his office, and it was right after Garrett had, right after the second transfer portal window had closed, and Garrett that solidified that Garrett was going to stick around. Even though it seemed like maybe the winter portal window was the one where he was, getting pursued maybe a little bit more heavily. There was still something you always had to keep an eye on, was like, is the backup quarterback going to leave? And he didn't, because as Garrett has said many times, like, teams came after him. He had options, but he wanted to stay around. He wanted to be at LSU. He wanted to be the starter here, even though it tested his patience. That's where he wanted to be. So, fast forward a couple of days, get an interview with Brian Kelly, and talking to him about Garrett, he used the word breadcrumbs. Like, these are the breadcrumbs toward consistency, toward being the top programs like Alabama and Georgia, is having someone like him decide to stay here and wait, and then become the starter. Because then you're not scrambling to search for transfer portal quarterbacks every year. That was the kind of the way he looked at it. This is those breadcrumbs, almost those stepping stones toward becoming the Alabamas and the Georgias of college football. Some of those top programs that LSU is chasing in the SEC right now, and having Garrett stick around, and then adding someone like Bryce Underwood, those are more of those breadcrumbs toward getting to that point.
This is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all our writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com. Please subscribe to The Advocate. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Please subscribe to our newsletter. We've got lots going on with LSU football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, softball, gymnastics, all that stuff coming up. So please stay up to date. Get the LSU newsletter. To do that, you sign up at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically the LSU Tigers on NOLA.com YouTube channel. So please subscribe there. If you don't catch us live, you can catch us after the fact there on that same channel. If you don't catch us there, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And we are brought to you, as always, by Champion Wealth Strategies. Go to Champion Wealth Strategies and plan like a champion today. Before we sort of shift the focus on this, we got a couple of comings and goings with LSU football still to discuss. One is Jyaire Brown, the corner with New Orleans ties, who's coming from Ohio State. Also, Logan Diggs leaves in a little bit of a surprise, or maybe a lot of a surprise. LSU's lead back from this past year, who obviously played for Brian Kelly at Notre Dame and came in and made quite a difference. And then Major Burns, LSU's leading tackler from this past year, that may surprise some. He had 93 tackles. He decides he's going to come back for one more year instead of trying his hand at the NFL draft. Any of these moves surprise you? Pleasant surprises, unpleasant surprises, anything of that nature?
The surprise isn't so much to me that Logan Diggs left LSU; it's that he didn't go to the draft. As he's a junior. He's had a couple of years of pretty good tape that he's put out there. Even though he didn't play a lot in the last month of the regular season for LSU, he had 653 yards on the ground and 7 touchdowns, and was the leading rusher for this team. And he had an 1,000-yard season in terms of like all-purpose yards at Notre Dame the year before. And so it's, I just sort of, you would think, because someone like that kind of profile, like, you would, I think, be perfectly understandable to go ahead and go on to the NFL.
He's going to leave. He's going to go pro.
Yeah,
sure.
and so we really don't know why Logan, decided to transfer instead. And he's in the portal, and I think that would be maybe the surprise here, was just that you would have thought maybe he would go to the NFL. And so for him to try to go now to his third school, because, he'll be able to transfer, folks can transfer now twice without penalty at the moment, as long as they entered in that first portal window, which, as a note, like, the portal window now for LSU players is closed on Saturday.
Right.
You could maybe see a name like officially enter or something like that, depending, because the paperwork sometimes takes a couple days or two to go through. But like, if somebody hadn't gotten that all in by Saturday, then they can't enter until after spring practice.
It'll open back. I was about to say it'll open it back up in the spring.
So that's kind of where that is right now. If you're in the transfer portal, you can still commit to a team. And if you're a graduate transfer, you can go at any time.
Right.
So that's kind of the situation as it stands right now. So that's the one that sort of caught me by surprise. I wasn't anticipating that. I thought he would maybe go to the NFL draft. As for the other two, not necessarily shocked that Major Burns came back. He could have left for the NFL, but when would he have gotten drafted? Would he have gotten drafted? Probably better for him to come on back to LSU, try to have another, a season that can maybe boost his stock, play a little bit better football, work on his pursuit angles in particular, and sometimes tackling in space, I think, were maybe the things that he needs to probably get better at going into next year. But that's at least a starter in the secondary who's coming back, and that's not a bad thing, especially with how LSU has sort of approached this offseason, not attacking the transfer portal super heavily. And then with Jyaire Brown, it is a transfer who they've gone after. Mm-hmm. And, that's a corner who is going to be able to come in and compete for playing time right away. And we'll see kind of, what he's able to do. This is somebody who played the most defensive snaps out of any Ohio State freshman in 2022. But he ended up kind of getting passed over on the depth chart, only played in 4 games this past year. But now he's coming to LSU, a guy who's from New Orleans, played his first 2 years at Warren Easton, then ended up finishing his high school career in Ohio. But this is somebody who some LSU players like Malik Neighbors were familiar with, having kind of gone up against him at times in high school. And so we'll see kind of how he fits into the mix. This is someone who is certainly going to be in that cornerback competition and as LSU goes into next year.
Speaking of Malik Neighbors, he just officially over the weekend entered into the NFL draft. And sometimes you go, I don't know if he made the right decision. Totally a right decision for Malik Neighbors. Couldn't improve his draft stock any better. He's had a tremendous carear and a tremendous season.
And it was no surprise.
No surprise. I was just like, I thought he'd already declared, but he made it official. So he's going to the NFL and rightly so. But the transfer portal doesn't cease to provide storylines and make you be puzzled about things. Logan Diggs, and look, you could have maybe said the same thing about Jaden Daniels when he left a starting job at Arizona State to come to LSU with no guarantees, with a new coaching staff, and what's that going to be like and everything. Obviously, it worked out for him. I mean, Logan Diggs was their leading rusher among running backs. I mean, Jaden was the leading rusher on the team, but here he's gone, and Garrett's not gonna. He's mobile, but he's not gonna run for 1,000 yards by any means.
Right.
So it's gonna be a chance for you to be the guy, the leading rusher on this team, and then set yourself up for the NFL draft. So these things continue to puzzle me greatly. Some of these decisions these young guys make, and I can't help but think that some of them are rather snap decisions. And then how many were there? Over 2,000 players entered the portal this year nationally?
Gosh, I don't know.
It was more than 2,000.
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know the exact number now.
I'd love to be able to poll them all and say, how many of you have regrets? There's going to be a fair number that have regrets.
There's going to be a fair number who have regrets, but I'll just say, and I have no earthly idea, honestly, why Logan Diggs has decided to do this, but and this may not apply to him, but you got to remember there may be personal things going on with whoever. You just never know. So
no, you don't, and it can be. Recruiting and player movements. I'll never forget this story that somebody wrote about. What makes a recruit sign with somebody? And this kid, this was years ago, said the school he signed with had a soft serve ice cream machine in the cafeteria, and the other school didn't.
Sold.
Yeah, so the other school got a soft serve. Or Coach Hayden Fry at Iowa. Yeah. He hugged me. He was the only one who hugged me on my official visit. You never know.
We could all use a little more love.
Yeah, so maybe he's going to go back to Notre Dame with Mike Denbrock or something like that. Maybe there's an attachment there. I don't know. I'm just making things up, but it's very puzzling. But LSU's got another cornerback from Ohio State. Hopefully now J.K. Johnson can play this coming year.
Yes. We saw him. This is kind of funny now. 3 years in a row, LSU has added a transfer corner from Ohio State.
Yeah, I forgot about Seven Banks.
Seven Banks, who got injured and then left after 1 year. And then J.K. Johnson, who has never played an LSU snap yet because he got injured in spring practice, and now Jyaire Brown. So hopefully, the last two, had some bad injury luck, and so hopefully, that can be avoided with Jyaire Brown this time for everybody involved and for his sake in particular. But yes, J.K., we saw him. Actually, a couple of times rehabbing off to the side with athletic trainers during bowl practice. And so he was even in full pads. He wasn't practicing, but he was at least that was a very good sign in what his progress is going to be. They expect to have him healthy next year. And so he'll be a factor in that competition.
But Jyaire Alexander is still a
Jyaire Alexander's unknown. We don't know what his recovery timeline is because LSU, it was kind of interesting with him. He never wanted to.
He never really disclosed what his injury is.
Yeah, Brian Kelly never was specific about it. And sometimes Brian Kelly will be, especially if it's something like with John Emery had a torn ACL and he came out and just said he had a torn ACL.
Right.
But he was very coy with what Jyaire Alexander's specific injury was. But we did see Jyaire Alexander. This was a couple weeks back. I saw him with a brace on his left leg, kind of around, with his knee, and using a crutch. And so it's certainly a significant thing. Obviously, it ended his season. But we don't exactly know what his recovery timeline is and when LSU expects to get him back yet.
One way or the other, LSU made it through this season. I say made it through this season. Certainly didn't have a lot of success in the secondary or on defense in general, as we've discussed pretty much every episode. But DBU found itself with barely any players, to throw out there at the cornerback position. We don't know, and we don't suspect that they've got any Thorpe Award winners right now. But at the very least, we know they've got guys. They've got players now. They've got numbers at the cornerback position. That's. Yes, they're going to have to figure this out in the spring. They still have to hire a cornerbacks coach and a safeties coach and all that. But now, don't you feel a little bit better about your depth and your ability to build, Brad?
There's some reason for optimism. You certainly when you start over, there's always reason for optimism with a new coach, new coaches on defense, and they have more depth, and you're getting some key players back in some key areas. Like I said. No, nobody played great this year, but these guys can return, and Toviano and Sam got experience, and Sage Ryan's Stamps. I'm sorry, not Andre Stamps. Thank you. And then at linebacker, Perkins is coming back and Greg Penn's coming back. I guess we're still kind of waiting to see what happens on the defensive line.
We are. The big thing that's going to be that everybody's sort of waiting on is by January 15th, what does Mason Smith do? Because he has the option of declaring for the NFL draft. He has not said one way or another what he is doing yet. And that's, when you look at this defense, the one decision that is really still kind of up in the air is what is he going to do? Because LSU really needs him back. Really needs him back on that defensive line, even though he didn't play didn't play great last year.
From a number standpoint,
from a talent standpoint, that's your starter.
Yeah,
and like if you don't have him, then I don't know. Like Dominic McKinley's coming in as a freshman. Is he going to be really ready to play right away?
That's a pretty difficult position
Sean
to
Washington's
play.
coming in as a junior college transfer. They have some belief in him, but you don't exactly know what he's going to do at the college at this level after jumping from East Mississippi, and so it's like. Sorry, Rad, to go on this long tangent when you're just asking a simple question, but that when we look at what's next for this defense is everybody's like wondering just what is Mason Smith going to do? Like that's what what has got to be decided now. And I think for him, he needs to maybe see who's going to be the defensive line coach. He was coming off an ACL into a situation where LSU didn't have a defensive line coach with who was experienced defensive line coach. John Jancic, that wasn't his area of expertise. And
as we discussed,
then they had to bring in Pete Jenkins. And
right.
I mean, they need to get someone in there who can help him develop and help him unlock this talent that is there. And we saw flashes of it as a freshman. And we heard about it even during the preseason practice before his ACL injury in 2022. It's like, there's a lot that can be really great about Mason Smith. And they just got to get a defensive line coach in there to be able to help him get to that point because he needs coaching.
Right. Maybe no better example of the effect that all this turnover at defensive line coaches had than the impact it's had or lack of impact it's had on Mason Smith. So,
sorry. Rab, continue.
Sorry.
Yes, I agree. That's very good.
I was going to shift the focus here before we wrap this up and just, get your expertise on this, Rab. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't note the LSU men and the LSU women. They opened up SEC play this past weekend in basketball. Not necessarily a surprise. Ole Miss is a difficult place for the women to play. That's a tough team. Very well
Sweet
coached.
16 last year.
Yeah, that's a very, 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 very well coached, tough team. Team with a lot of grit. Angel Reese, 21 points. Michaela Williams, did what she did.
If you haven't seen her put a little bit of a shoulder into the Ole Miss player and send her flying, then just stand there and park there and launch a 3-pointer. You need to go find it. It was on SportsCenter Top 10 Monday morning.
Certainly a fabulous freshman, if ever there was one. That wasn't so much a surprise, obviously, that they win. But the LSU men didn't just win in College Station on Saturday. They win by 15 points, and it was really, after a pretty tight first half where they're hanging tough, they took it to them in the second half. This has got to be nothing but a surprise, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they won their SEC opener last year, so you're pumping the brakes just a little bit, baby. And they won at Texas A&M last year. That was their only other win. That was the last time they won a true road game. But yeah, that was a big surprise. They were a double-digit underdog, and Texas A&M is looking solid. Maybe not like Tennessee or Kentucky, but looking like a good, solid team and well coached under Buzz Williams. But you have some reason for potential optimism with this team. As the broadcasters were saying during the game, they've got size inside with Baker, and they've got some guard play with Cook, and they've got Jordan Wright. They've got some pieces, and it's are they going to win the SEC? No. Are they going to make a run to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament? No. But baby steps with the program. They're still coming out from under this cloud of the whole NCAA probation, whether you think it's right or whether you think it's wrong. This has been a big deal for Matt McMahon to deal with, and just his second year as coach. And people have to be patient, but they're showing some steps towards progress. And to go on the road and open SEC play with a win like this was really big. That was impressive. We'll see where they take it from here. Last year, obviously, they didn't take it anywhere, but this looks like they have more pieces to work with this year. And a second year under a coach under Matt McMahon, who is, I'm telling you, folks, the guy's a well-respected coach. He could have gone a lot of places, when he left Murray State, other than LSU, a lot of Power 5 programs. And so we'll see where they go from here. But it's certainly an interesting story to watch as they go forward.
We will continue to watch as we go forward. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering if we could circle back to corners real quick and sort of close
of course.
that. Because just to kind of I just wanted to lay out real quick, basically, you're talking about numbers.
Yeah.
And who LSU is going to have as we kind of go into next season is, I just wanted to kind of go through the list real quick so people understand, because there's so much change now in college football. Okay, so here's who kind of names to know. Jyaire Brown, you've got Sage Ryan, you've got Ashton Stamps, who had a surgery done here recently. He didn't specify the nature of the surgery, but he was somebody who had been dealing with both hamstring and groin injuries this season, and he had what looked like a lower body surgery done here in December. Not something that's expected to keep him out like a very long time, but he's dealing with that. Javian Toviano, who will be interesting to see if LSU maybe actually moves him over to nickel, or if it does keep him at cornerback like he played near the end of the season. And then you've got your high school freshman coming in with Juwan Johnson, PJ Woodland. Now I'm going to forget the next name. Thank you, Bernard Causey. And then there is one more whose name all of a sudden is slipping my brain, and I feel terrible about it. Oh my gosh!
I don't have my list
wanted to bring out this list, and then I can't remember his name. Somebody fill in for me. So while I look it up real quick, please.
I'll tell you what, we'll close it out there, and hopefully Wilson can just hit us on the very end on the way out. We, as we say, we are typically here on Mondays and Thursdays. On all our social channels on YouTube, it's specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. You can catch us live there. If you don't catch us live there, you can always catch us after the fact. You can also catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. Please subscribe to The Advocate to read all our writers' great work. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And again, subscribe to our newsletter so you can stay up to date with everything in the world of LSU athletics. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter.
Wallace Foster.
I'm sorry?
Wallace
Foster. To subscribe, you go. I'm sorry. To subscribe, you go to the LSU. To subscribe to the LSU newsletter, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. And again, today and every day, we are brought to you by Champion Wealth Strategies. Go to championwealthstrategies.com to learn more and plan like a champion today. A little bit of a goofy ending there.
Yeah, sorry. Right. And then J.K. Johnson and Zy Alexander. Okay, now I'm done.
For the stumbling Scott Rabalais and Wilson Alexander, my name is Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.